5%. The rest of Latin America at close to 4.5–5%. And the developed world, the average forecast is between 1 to 1.5%. Contrast that now with the level of imports from these countries. You're looking at close to about 4.2 to 4.6% of GDP as a composition of imports from the developing countries, whereas only close to about 1.4% import level as a percentage of GDP from the developed countries. So clearly the opportunity imports for them, which is exports for us, lies in these countries, in these areas. However, if you look at the breakup of our export basket today, it's completely skewed towards the West. The EU and the US together combined are close to about 36% of our exports, whereas Africa and Latin America close to only about 11%. And therefore, in our foreign trade policy that we announced last year, we have completely tried to change tack so as to reorient ourselves to this new growth mantra that is going to be coming out in the next decade or so. So therefore, there are important opportunities, but at the same time, it's important for us in government to be helpful to the MSME sector. Because if there are external shocks, if there are internal shocks, the capabilities and the capacities to be able to withstand those shocks are not as robust as multinational companies for the MSME sector. And therefore, I also believe, as Dinesh Rai ji believes, and I believe Arun ji will also reiterate this theme, that hand-holding is required. So what, in my opinion, are the 4 or 5 critical issues that we need to look at? Number one is financing and funding. Dinesh ji talked about SIDBI increasing its credit guarantee from 50 lakhs to 1 crore, the lock-in period coming down to about 18 months. In the last budget, we announced a 4,000 crore corpus for MSMEs. The MSME Development Act of 2006 has been altered so as to include the service sector within that domain. The second critical pillar, I believe, is technology upgradation and processes. Dinesh ji has talked about at length in terms of what the government is doing. But one or two of the things that I would like to have the private sector do as well is what I'd like to elaborate on. The first is to be able to build technological skills and capabilities. And I think for that, to be able to partner with engineering colleges, engineering institutes is very important. 3 months ago, I was in Israel, and I looked at how the Israeli government has actually participated in the small-scale sector in Israel in enhancing their technological capabilities. The very fact that they have set up incubators where small companies can come in, co-locate their facilities. Government has been a participant in that. I had long interactions with President Perez, and we talked about setting up a joint India-Israeli incubator. And I would very much like to pursue that dialogue with the MSME sector, ministry, as well as Prithviraj Chauhan sir in science and technology. And if FISME would like to take a role in that, I'd be very, very happy to help. But I think that a joint India-Israeli incubator idea based in India would be a huge fillip to taking us up the technology curve. The second area is, I believe, we must build our IPR capabilities. Our intellectual processes, our intellectual patents, our intellectual properties. We have been a repository of intellectual property, albeit 2,000 years ago. I think we have to reorient that strength, re-emphasize that strength in today's environment. We must develop technology and protect our intellectual property, which I believe should be a core part of our portfolio going forward. Market access. That's the third pillar. Under the Commerce and Industry Ministry, we have once again looked at the focus market scheme where we've increased incentives from 2.5% to 3% to 26 new markets. Under the market-linked focus product scheme, increased it from 1.25% to 2%, looking at an additional 13 new markets. So I think an increased international linkage is very, very key. People and skill development, pillar number 4. Under the National Skill Development Mission, we are looking along with the private sector, because I think the only model that will work in this area is the PPP model. We have identified 1,600 ITIs, 10,000 vocational training schools, 5 lakh skill development centers that need to be set up over the next 5 years. We have put aside close to about 5,000 crores as a corpus for that. But I think in that initiative, it's very, very important that the private sector and the public sector work together. Just to give you an example and a vignette, because Agarwalji talked about the rural areas not being able to be skilled. That's absolutely a fact. And I think industry also needs to concentrate in the rural areas. We have just set up in my constituency, or the process of setting up, along with the ILFS who's present here today, a vocational training school, along with Gale, which is going to look at a throughput of close to about 2,000 students coming through that vocational training school over the next 2 to 3 year period. So when we talk about youth, it's not only the demographic dividend that we need to talk about, but along with that, the skilling of that demographic dividend is extremely important. The last pillar that I'd like to talk about is the issue of transaction costs. Not the hidden part of the transaction costs, but because unfortunately that is something that we have to deal with as a society, but the one that is transparent. And I believe that processes need to be defined, processes need to be streamlined, redundancies need to be taken out. And therefore I set up a project management group, not a task force, not a steering committee, not another report, but I set up a project management group along with CII, along with FICCI, along with all industry stakeholders about 8 months ago, and I chair that project management group myself. I'm monitoring it myself. We identified across 6 sectors, textiles, leather, garments, gems and jewelry, 6 sectors, exactly what the transaction costs are for every exporter from factory to FOB. And those transaction costs that we can get rid of, refiling, multiple filing of papers, additional costs that are incurred, we vow to take steps to ensure that those are eliminated not today but forever. And I'm happy to announce today that by the end of this month or early next month, the Commerce and Industry Ministry, along with all related ministries, I have been interacting with the Finance Minister, with the Shipping Minister, with the Railway Minister, with the Agricultural Minister, with the Civil Aviation Minister. We have identified a number of steps where we will eliminate transaction costs. Transaction costs from a consulting point of view, when we did our study, I said I am not going to look at any number unless it is monetized. I want a monetized number that we are going to be reducing. And we came up with an approximation of close to about $8 to $10 billion that are incurred in terms of transaction costs for exporters out of a total export basket of last fiscal 176 billion. So we are talking about almost 6 to 7% of our export basket. And the report that I will release will not only, as I said, be a report, but along with that report will be a detailed compendium of all the steps under my ministry, under the Finance Ministry, and all other related ministries that will already have been taken so as to eliminate a certain percentage of that monetized number that I have come up with. I'm not going to release that number now because then I'll have nothing else to release. But let me tell you, it will be a substantial number that we'll be coming up with. Finally, I believe in 2 tenets in life, and this is something that was taught to me at Stanford Business School by a person that I think not only I but all of us in this room admire, the founder of Intel, Andy Grove. I had the opportunity of being taught a class on technology and strategic thinking combined. And he said to us one thing when on the last day of class, which has remained with me ever since. He said 2 things. He said, remember in life, whichever area you go into, there are 2 things. 1, change is constant. 2, only the paranoid survive. So I'm paranoid. and I believe in change, and I believe the SME sector believes in that as well, which is why the next titans of India